Hi, I'm Wendy Strgar, and welcome to my home yoga studio and to the series that I am so excited to be producing, Yoga for Sexual Health, with my dear friend Caitlin Young and my favorite yoga teacher. And so we just finished a little segment about waking up the fire, your transverse abdominal fire. And I was saying before that, like, I've had 4 babies, and if I can get this fire back and this strength, anybody can. And so that's the beautiful thing. But it takes a lot of vigilant attention. And then Caitlin was going to explain to us why, after we get clear about how to sort of fire up those pelvic floor muscles, then we have to open. That's what we're going to learn to do now, right?
Yes.
So why do we have to open?
So we have to open because next comes the strength. And before we move into strength, we need to first practice opening.
Right.
And for both of those steps, we must have the awareness of stability.
Right.
So
which is that first piece.
That first piece. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do a 3-way hip stretch with a yoga strap. If you don't have a yoga strap, you can use a belt from a bathrobe.
Okay.
And so what we're going to do is we're going to open the outer hip, we're going to open the inner hip, and we're going to open the hamstrings.
And it's just so people are aware that, you know, if you can't feel solid and secure doing these kind of exercises, you can imagine how this is going to affect your sex life, right? Because, and just for note, people actually have diseases. I mean, there's disease states that don't allow you to open at all vaginally. And so I would guess that that would be associated with your flexibility and safety to feel like you can open this part of your body.
Definitely.
You know?
And we're more up in this part of the body, right? The lumbopelvic. And well, for today's work. But
right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And another piece that I see is very important too is the health of the low back. There's a lot of sacroiliac instability, sciatica.
Right.
And that's a common muscle pattern that happens from weak abdominals and tight low back.
Right.
So this series we're going to do is awesome for stabilizing the pelvis and opening the lower back in a safe way.
Yeah. Okay, good. So she's going to show us how to do it.
Okay.
And then she's going to show me how to correct it.
Okay, so we start out lying down. And we're going to start with the leg up in the strap. Okay, so this leg can be either on the floor or knee bent or legs long. And if the leg's long, that means you probably have a bit more flexibility to work with. So here I'm opening the hamstring. This is part 1. A couple things to keep in mind. You may definitely be kind of working out here, and that's great.
And I might be.
Yeah. And that's all good. What we're looking for is so if you can check my hip bones here. I want to lower this hip down so that my hip stays stable.
And
even, exactly. So I'm going to engage my pelvic floor muscles. I'm not flattening my low back, but I'm lifting in and up with my pelvic floor. That's where we start from. Then we start.
So that's the order of operations thing again, right?
Yeah. Okay. So pelvic floor lifts in and up. Hamstring starts to stretch as I bring my leg toward me. So I'm getting the whole back of my leg to activate here. And we'll hold 5 breaths. I won't do it all now. Shoulders soft, neck relaxed, jaw soft, palate soft. These are all going to help us just be aware. Then we'll take it into the IT band or outer hip stretch. Really awesome for releasing low back pain. And my favorite is to use my thumb, press it into my hip flexor, because the hip flexors, as we've talked a lot about, they're antagonist muscles. They're going to really affect what's going on. So turn off the hip flexors and then guide that
with your thumb.
With your thumb, and then guide your leg across the body until you feel a stretch. And wow, that feels great. So I feel my whole outer femur bone stretching. It's like the thigh bone stretching away from the sacrum.
But what you just really want to make sure is that it's not like this is not catching up here.
So a couple things are not happening. One thing that's not happening is the hips not lifting up. Another thing that's not happening is it's not hiking up. Okay, so it's down and stable and then stretching. And so some people might need to bend their knees, and we'll explore there. You want to feel like there's a racer stripe up the side of your pants.
And so the point is that if you lift your hip up, or you're hiking it up, or you're whatever, then you're not actually getting the stretch.
You're not getting the same stretch, and you're also not stabilizing the core, which is what we're going to just keep repeating over and over.
Right,
how can
order
we
of
stabilize?
operations.
So then the third hip stretch is going to be knee on the floor, and now I'm going to turn my awareness to this left hip. I'm going to anchor my left hand on my left hip, and I'm going to let both knees fall open evenly so that my pelvis is still staying stable. Okay, so what happens often in this pose is all the weight shifts over into the right leg. And then this hip's lifted and then the pelvis is unstable. So starting from the beginning, stabilizing pelvic floor lifts in and up, both legs move open, and then you let the breath move, and we'll take 3 full breaths.
And so I'm not going to probably look like this. And if people can't get that big a stretch, what's more important is the integrity of the hips than how far you get.
Exactly.
Right?
That's absolutely right.
Okay,
so let's give you a chance and we'll talk through it.
Okay. So I can just say that I'm not going to be looking like Caitlin. But I'm going to try and do the important pieces that she pointed out to me. So
we'll start with the head down.
Okay.
And luckily you have an extra set of eyes to check everything out for you. And then we'll soften the shoulders down as well. And you might notice we have a little blanket here. We're on a wood floor with a yoga mat, so it's a lot more comfortable for the spine to have a little bit of padding, towel, blanket. Yeah, so I think the knee bend for you looks great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we'll just take a moment here before you really focus on getting a big stretch. Let's just check in with the pelvis. What's going on there? So yeah, kind of melting the back of your body into the floor.
Okay, and so the first thing I want to do is actually get my pelvic floor to lift in and up, so that I'm actually really working here.
Yes, and we're not imprinting, and we're gonna just soften the hip flexor a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, so let's take a nice deep breath in. And as you exhale, think about pelvic floor in and up, but we're not flattening the pelvis. That looks beautiful. And then from there, you'll start to draw your leg into a hamstring stretch. And you don't need to destabilize the hip flexor at this one. I'm just kind of checking in. So we want to feel a stretch all the way up the back of the hamstring into the calf.
But not on my face and not in my shoulders and not in my neck.
Yeah.
And it's funny how all those muscles think they can help, but they're not actually helping at all.
Well, and some people, if you notice your throat is shining up toward the sky, you may want to put a little blanket or pillow underneath your head so that it's comfortable. Are you feeling a stretch in the back?
Totally.
Okay, so let's take 3 more full breaths.
And so I actually have my knee like straight here, but what I don't want to do is have my knee locked.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you're going to straighten the knee fully, it's a little more safe to do that here than in a standing pose. Sure.
And, you know, so I can actually feel this hip flexor start to pull. So then I would pull down, I push down here as I keep pulling up. And actually, I think maybe the reason this hip flexor is engaging and pulling at me is because I am not paying attention here.
Okay.
So I mean, I have to really, really pay attention to keep this active and awake.
So the same principles all apply when we move on to the second phase. If you want to extend this leg long now. And we're going to bend the knee. Let's bend the knee first. So before you even move across, we're going to just set this up nice and carefully, right? So softening the shoulders and even melting your ribs down just a little bit. That's going to stabilize you from a really strong place. So we'll take a breath in to the pelvic floor first. And exhale, pelvic floor lifts in and up. Leg starts to guide across the midline. Hip stays down, pelvic floor stays active. We're starting to feel that stretch on the outer hip and into the low back perhaps. Now you can play with a bend in the knee or a straight knee. Different sensations for different people. Depends on what's going on, but stay with your breath. The inhale breath moving into the stretch. The exhale breath stabilizing and connecting. 2 more breaths. Inhale, softening the shoulders, the chest, the jaw, the palate. Exhale, pelvic floor in and up. Beautiful. Good. And we're going to activate this bottom leg as well. Flexing. 1 more breath here. You're doing a really nice job. Good. And then inhaling as you come back to center. And then let's take this left foot onto the floor, planting the foot, and we'll take the left hand to the left thigh here.
And this is where I'm going to pay really as much attention to this stabilization here, and this kind of this hip to kind of.
So I think about Frankenstein of the hips before we even move into this. I like to think about bolts right down through both hips, hip bones. So you're not going anywhere. Your legs are moving around your pelvis. Right. So let's bring the breath with it when we move together. So inhale, just softening. Exhale, pelvic floor lifts in and up, and then the knees move open together. Yeah, that's beautiful. So then we pause for 3 breaths. And this
is definitely a different level of opening than you were in. But it's like if I go way over here where you were,
then
I'm losing my hips.
Right.
So I feel like that's important to take note for our audience.
Absolutely.
That I can't go here and do what you did, but I can go here and I can hold this steady.
Yes.
And that's the goal, right?
That is the goal. That is the goal. And that's how you know you're not going to be hurting yourself.
Right, because over here, I'm not really getting anything out of it, and I am going to torque my hips.
Yeah, I don't even want to see you doing that.
Yeah.
I worry.
Yeah.
So let's take 2 breaths. Just enjoy the benefits. Let your belly fill like a balloon as you breathe in. Yeah, and then let yourself just sink down, melt toward the earth. One more time. You can really energize that low pelvic area with the softening. And then the exhale draws the knees back together like magnets.
And the interesting thing is that for you that this might just be opening because you actually are so strong and stable here. But for me to maintain this stability, I'm working. I'm still have this fire thing happening, even in this opening. And I think that's actually really a worthwhile